The honourable member for Cartwright-L'Anse Clair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm pleased to be able to stand here and speak for a few minutes about my district. I'm just going into my second sitting in the House. I live in a beautiful part of the province, but we certainly got lots of issues, and the people elected me to be their voice, and I'm happy to stand every time I have an opportunity and address them and keep them in the forefront and educate the people here in the House of Assembly on some of the issues in our district. I have to go back to the members opposite reference to campaigning out in Virginia Waters, so I would be remiss if I didn't mention it as well. It was a stormy night and I wasn't dressed properly, but the warm reception at the doors last night, I can tell you, certainly made up for the cold, stormy night, especially when you go to a door and they tell you they've been one colour all of their life and now this time they're changing. That was really rewarding, so we'll continue to stay the course the way the polls are staying the course. And that's a beautiful, nice, hot colour for the member across the way. Now, in Labrador, there's a quote that I really like, and I've referenced it here before, and I'll reference it again now. Sometimes to have true equity, you have to have the unequal treatment of equals. In Labrador, Mr. Chair, it costs more to do business. But the government of this day, no matter what colour their stripe, they have a moral and an ethical obligation to ensure that the people of Labrador, like everywhere else in the province, they get treated as fairly and as equally as possible. And it always humours me when I would stand and raise an issue and someone can yell out, "Sure, you're getting a new school." Well, is that anything that the rest of the province don't have? Or someone says, "Sure, you're getting a road." Is that anything exceptional that the rest of the province don't have? That's basic infrastructure. There's people around the province complaining about the potholes and their old roads, and we're still trying to get the first road. We're trying to catch up all the time. I want to go down through a number of different sectors, and I would be remiss if I didn't start with transportation, because I can tell you we've certainly had our fair share of transportation issues. Really, really frustrating, and I don't have time in the few minutes that I have to share some of the stories, but real life stories, the suffering and the hardship because of the transportation issues, especially since 2014 came in, very, very sad. When you've got people who depended on the ferry because they can't fly because of serious air conditions, you've got people that need to move for dialysis assessment and things like that. And I understand ice conditions. I understand that you can't do much about ice that's 4 feet thick. But then when I talk to Coast Guard, and they're saying if you had a boat with a bit more horsepower and you had something with ice class, it really, really saddens you, because what it tells me is that in these bad ice conditions, Coast Guard don't have much to work with in that old boat. And it seems, Mr. Chair, that we're going to have to wait until 2016 until we get any better. And I'm not sure what we're going to do in the meantime, but we will keep hammering it away. But when you see places like Change Island, St. Brendan's, Fogo, and all these places, as soon as the ferry goes down, they get an air service, but yet this government seems to think that driving 3,000 kilometres and through 3 provinces for the Aunt Nillies and the Uncle Johns, that in the dead of winter, in the climate that we live in, that is an acceptable option, and it absolutely isn't, Mr. Speaker. And I think in the meantime, while we're having all these transportation woes, it's a good time for us to go back and revisit the fixed link, because if we're cut off the way we are, it's time for us to get back to the drawing board and say, okay, is it better to go under the ice? We've got a huge issue. There's a lot of people impacted. We got about 20,000 people in Labrador that's impacted. Then there's the Northern Peninsula, and there's the island. And what's going to happen, sadly, Mr. Chair, is when Route 138 gets connected, they're going to be scrambling to catch up and do the fixed link. Whereas if there was any vision on the part of this government, it saddens me deeply that a subsea cable is going across the Strait of Belle Isle and it should be running through a tunnel. That's what you call poor planning and no vision. But I will be starting to petition for a fixed link. I know that the former Premier he called a pre-feasibility study, and that study showed that it would be a cost of about $1.2 billion, and it could be done over 10 or 11 years. That's an 8-year-old study. I don't believe we can depend on the figures in that right now. We've got people out there who have travelled to Norway, and they have visited some of the 900 tunnels in Norway, and they're telling us that it can be done for less than $500 million. So let's go back and look. So I am calling on government, urging them to call for a feasibility study. And let's look at the figures, and let's see what is a viable option. In the meantime, that's one part. The ferries is a big issue in the district. But then the roads. In the Labrador Straits, Route 510, 76 kilometres, we've got 35-year-old pavement. I've had people here in the House say to me before, roads is an issue everywhere. But I guarantee you, I've driven in places where people call it bad roads, but you haven't seen bad roads until you come to my area. And back in the spring when I was campaigning, I actually had members say to me, I wish some of the people complaining about roads in your area, in my area, could come to your area and see what you're dealing with. And coal patch, you know, you can only go so far with coal patch. And then it's a safety issue. It's just a miracle, as I've said before, that lives are not lost on this road. And I'm happy to see that the pavement for Red Bay going north to Goose Bay has been announced. We know that it was 6 years on the western side. So in the meantime, I would urge the Minister to ensure that some money for ongoing maintenance is in place while we're awaiting the pavement. When we think about, we've got people commuting on that road every day for jobs, we've got ambulances, and we don't have cell service. We don't have coverage like that if there is an accident. So we certainly need the road. I believe there is a responsibility that this government has to the safety of the travelling public. So I will continue to lobby for that. Health, Mr. Speaker, the Minister was talking about health. I want to draw attention to seniors. I recently heard someone say, don't differentiate between your seniors because they live on a fixed income and they're all equal no matter where they live. That statement could not be further from the truth, Mr. Speaker. If a senior is living in Mount Pearl and they need to see a specialist, they're going to get in their vehicle and spend $3 in gas and they're going to go to the health signs and see their specialist. If a senior in my area needs to see a specialist, they're going to get on a boat and they're going to maybe be 52 hours on the boat, and then they're going to get to Corner Brook and they might be stranded for 8 or 9 days, and all in all, their trip have cost them several grand of money, and communities are holding dirt tournaments and things like that to offset the cost. I don't know where we'd be without the generosity of our small community stepping up to the plate. Physiotherapy, one example of where we could have much better service in rural parts if there was a will on the part of government to make this happen. A physiotherapist is not a person that needs to travel with a lot of big equipment. And so, sadly, many times when I've gone into communities in my district, especially in Southeast, they say, Lisa, I travel to Blanc to see a physiotherapist, and by the time I get back, the road is so bad I'm off work for another 2 weeks. Guess who's paying the bill when they're off work? The government is. So I don't know why we don't have a physiotherapist coming down, you know, doing at least a monthly visit or every several weeks. Really happy to see to hear my colleague today asked a question on eating disorders. I didn't hear an answer. I didn't hear it touched. Eating disorders is a growing issue. I'm hearing it from parents. We're not educated. There's no information out there. I'm hearing it from people at the Janeway saying this is a growing epidemic. And I'm hearing it from schools, from teachers saying we don't even know enough about what to watch for with the signs. Look at the money that's being spent when if we put a little bit of money out in education and promotion up front, people would know the signs and you would get that early intervention. Businesses. Businesses are paying, in my district, are paying some of the highest commercial rates in the province. And yet, sadly, when you have some businesses that want to look at alternative options on their own and want to introduce wind energy, Bill 61 came in, giving Nalcor a monopoly, and they can't even do that. And then there's all of the red tape and the things they have to go through in addition. Services in the small communities have been basically gutted over the last decade. And I keep going back to the Employment Assistance Services offices because I know firsthand the value of the work. I had to take 30 resumes under my arm and sit down with Gilbert Bennett at Nalcor and try and sift through why my people who were qualified were not
Order,
getting
please.
work because they didn't have
Order,
an employment
please.
office in the area to go to. Very, very sad, Mr. Speaker, and I did have a whole bunch of others, but I will save that for another time. Thank you.